Hey, Bryn. This is part of your birthday present. I'm going to read to you a Roald Dahl story called The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar. It starts out a little slow, but I think you're really going to like it. Chapter 1. Henry Sugar was 41 years old and unmarried. He was also wealthy. He was wealthy because he had a rich father who was now dead. He was unmarried because he was too selfish to share any of his money with a wife. He was 6 feet 2 inches tall, but he wasn't really as good looking as he thought he was. He paid a great deal of attention to his clothes. He went to an expensive tailor for his suits, to a shirt maker for his shirts, and to a boot maker for his shoes. He used a costly aftershave on his face, and he kept his hands soft with a cream that contained turtle oil. His hairdresser trimmed his hair once every 10 days, and he always took a manicure at the same time. His upper front teeth had been capped at an incredible expense because the originals had a rather nasty yellowish tinge. A small mole had been removed from his left cheek by a plastic surgeon. He drove a Ferrari car that must have cost him about the same as a country cottage. He lived in London in the summer, but as soon as the first frosts appeared in October, he was off to the West Indies or the south of France, where he stayed with friends. He had friends? That sounds weird. All his friends were from wealthy or inherited money. That makes sense. Henry had never done a day's work in his life, and his personal motto, which he invented himself, was this: "It is better to incur a mild rebuke than to perform an onerous task." His friends thought this was hilarious. Men like Henry Sugar are to be found drifting like seaweed all over the world. They can be seen especially in London, New York, Paris, Nassau, Montego Bay, Cannes, and Saint-Tropez. They are not particularly bad men, but they are not good men either. They are of no real importance. They are simply a part of the decoration. All of them, all wealthy people of this type, have one peculiar thing in common. They have a terrific urge to make themselves wealthier than they already are. The million is never enough, nor is the 2 million. Always they have this insatiable longing to get more money. And that is because they live in constant terror of waking up one morning and finding that there is nothing in the bank. These people all employ the same methods for trying to increase their fortunes. They buy stocks and shares and watch them going up and down. They play roulette and blackjack for high stakes in casinos. They bet on horses. They bet on just about everything. Henry Sugar had once staked £1,000 on the result of a tortoise race on Lord Liverpool's tennis lawn. Imagine having a lawn just for tennis. And he had wagered double that sum with a man called Henry Hanbury on an even sillier bet, which was as follows. They let Henry's dog out into the garden and watched it through the window. But before the dog was let out, each man had to guess beforehand what would be the first object the dog would lift its leg against. Would it be a wall, a post, a bush, or a tree? Edmund chose a wall. Henry, who had been studying his dog's habit for days with a view to making this particular bet, chose a tree, and he won the money. With ridiculous games such as these, Henry and his friends tried to conquer the deadly boredom of being idle and wealthy. Henry himself, as you may have noticed, was not above cheating a little on these friends of his if he saw the chance. The bet with the dog was definitely not honest, nor, if you wanted to know, was the bet on the tortoise race. Henry cheated on that one by secretly forcing a sleeping pill powder into the mouth of his opponent's tortoise an hour before the race. Now that you've got a rough idea of the sort of person Henry Sugar was, I can begin my story. One summer weekend, Henry drove down from London to Guildford to stay with Sir William Wyndham. The house was magnificent, and so were the grounds, but when Henry arrived on Saturday afternoon, it was already pelting with rain. Tennis was out. Croquet was out. So was swimming in Sir William's outdoor pool. The host and his guests sat glumly in the drawing room, staring at the rain splashing against the windows. The very rich were enormously resentful of bad weather. It is the one discomfort that their money cannot do anything about. Somebody in the room said, "Let's have a game of canasta for lovely high stakes." The other people thought that was a splendid idea, but as there were 5 people in all, one of them would have to sit out. They cut the cards. Henry drew the lowest, the unlucky card. The other 4 sat down and began to play. Henry was annoyed at being out of the game. He wandered out of the drawing room into the great hall. He stared at the pictures for a few moments, and he walked on through the house, bored to death and having nothing to do. Finally, he mooched into the library. Sir William's father had been a famous book collector, and all 4 walls of his huge room were lined with books from floor to ceiling. Henry Sugar was not impressed. He wasn't even interested. The only books he read were detective novels and thrillers. He ambled aimlessly around the room, looking to see if he could find any of the sort of books that he liked. But the ones in Sir William's library were all leather-bound volumes with names on them like Balzac, Ibsen, Voltaire, Johnson, and Pepys. Boring rubbish, the whole lot of it, Henry told himself. And he was just about to leave when his eye caught and held a book that was quite different from all the others. It was so slim. He would never have noticed it if it hadn't been sticking out a little from the ones on either side. And he pulled it from the shelf. He saw that it was exactly nothing more than a cardboard-covered exercise book of the kind children used at school. The cover was dark blue, but there was nothing written on it. Henry opened the exercise book. On the first page, hand-printed in ink, it said, "A report on an interview with Imran Khan, the man who could see without his eyes, by John F. Cartwright, M.D., Bombay, India, December of 1934. That sounded mildly interesting, Henry told himself. He turned over a page. What followed was a hand written in black ink. The writing was clear and neat. Henry read the first 2 pages standing up. Suddenly he found himself wanting to read on. This was good stuff. It was fascinating. He carried the little book over to a leather armchair by the window and settled himself comfortably. Then he started reading again from the beginning. That's the end of chapter 1. I'm going to read all 14 chapters, and maybe you can watch them or listen to them before bedtime or something. But I really hope you're going to like this story as much as I do. Until I send you the next one. Bye for now, Bryn.